It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Aaron Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Aaron Saunders. Alan, what's going on?
Everything is going on. I feel like I've written 30 stories today. I don't know how many it is, but I feel like I've written 30.
I actually, you might be underselling you're going to be at or above that number, I assume, by the end of the day. So we'll see how many we can get to. The byline machine, Aaron Saunders. Obviously, with this happening, before we get into anything free agency wise, a move that preceded free agency is what I want to talk about first, because we obviously hadn't recorded an episode since the weekend. Sunday night news comes in: the Steelers trading for star wide receiver DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks, giving up a second-round pick, immediately giving him a 5-year, $150 million contract. Alan, what do we think of the compensation, both going back to Seattle as well as the contract being given to DK?
Yeah, I mean, what the Seahawks were asking for, not surprised the Steelers were aggressive in meeting their asking price. Was actually very sure that something was going to happen last night as I was going in to record the final word. And of course, the news broke as I was walking through the vestibule with Rob Rossi and Adam Crowley as we were on our way in. So I got to break it to those guys. It's none of and the contract amount exactly what Metcalf was looking for, $30 million a year. I think that was the fair going rate. It just feels like he was probably going to get traded for that, and he was probably going to get that contract from someone, why not the Steelers? Maybe the only thing I will say is like 4 years extended onto the year he already had feels long-ish, but like not crazy. He'll be 32 at the end of it. That's not a big problem, but maybe that's the only part of it that kind of was a little bit surprising to me.
Has the guaranteed money on that come out yet?
No, I've not seen the details.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it. The one thing that I will say, and I said this about him, when people were asking me about him as opposed to some other receivers that could be available in trade as opposed to free agency or whatever, like any receiver that was available. And I think about and I think everybody just looks at DK and like, yes, he's super explosive and everything like that. But I do, because of like just the way that he plays, the body type, feel like his game could age pretty well as opposed to other players. So I don't have a lot of concern about what the back end of the contract could look like in his early 30s. And even honestly, again, depending on what the guarantees are, chances are it's structured in a way that they could move on should it. But I actually feel like he could age pretty well as a player.
Yeah, I generally think power age is better than speed.
Yeah.
And although he is fast, I think the thing that stands out about DK Metcalf is the power. It's significant.
I actually, and I don't, I hesitate to bring this up, but I feel like I want to get your thought on if you've heard something similar, just throwing it out there. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday regarding this. They had called me like right after the news dropped about it. And I said, I figured the Chargers, like that was the team that had been mentioned and everything like that. Apparently the Steelers had put this on the table to them early in the day. They had gone to the Chargers to tell them that Pittsburgh was offering a 2, and they would have also been willing to give a 2. But I guess they actually were willing to accommodate what DK wanted, and he preferred to go to Pittsburgh over LA, which is kind of crazy to think about, but I didn't know if you had heard that.
I had heard that the warm weather part of what was put out there earlier in the week was total nonsense. And so I guess that, jives with that. I think,
Well, I think about the quarterback, like, from Justin Herbert to question mark is really the part that I thought about.
Yeah, I mean, I think people overrate all that stuff, man. Money talks, and I think the logo matters a lot too. Like, people aren't like, when NFL free agents aren't like combing through the depth chart to be like, who would I play with? Blah, blah. They'll be like, do I want to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Chargers? Do the Chargers even have fans? Like, it's a no-brainer. You want to play for the Steelers. Like, it's just, especially when you're talking about a 5-year deal, like what the Steelers are right now, who's in the Steelers locker room, probably who their coach is, it's going to completely change over the next 5 years. Like, so you got to be where you want to be. You got to be in the organization that you trust to go where you want to go. And I think it's reasonable to have some skepticism about the Los Angeles Chargers at this point.
what is the fallout in your mind of this? I know, like, you've put out, I know a lot of people put out the Steelers right now. They don't have the desire to trade George Pickens. That was before this move was made. One, could that change that? Or two, now it has happened where I proposed this scenario happening where he sees another receiver come in and then get an extension and what the fallout could be. Now, I'm not here to speculate what that's going to be. I just said if that scenario happens, I'll be curious to see how that plays out. So now we've seen that part take place. Where do you think this could potentially go from here in terms of George's future?
Yeah, I mean, I was skeptical they were going to sign him to a contract extension anyway. Now I think it's almost definite that they will not. And the question now is, does he even get to the 2025 season? Because I think people will be calling the Steelers about George Pickens. I reported at the Combine they were not aggressively shopping him, and that the reason for that was that they were not confident in their ability to find a replacement. Well, there's the replacement in DK Metcalf, and you could certainly trade Pickens for a day 2 draft pick and replace him with that player and have 4 wide receivers 1 through 4, really, assuming they can re-sign Calvin Austin after this year, locked up for the foreseeable future. I think that would be a pretty good situation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of good situations, you would think if they're able to keep this offense intact, it could be very desirable for a quarterback. Who that quarterback will be, my guess is as good as yours as we sit here right now. Currently, Skylar Thompson, the only quarterback under contract for the Steelers, as we sit here 5 p.m. with the free agency. I saw your tweet. It actually made me laugh. Like, they call it legal tampering. And you were like, yeah, that doesn't exist.
So, if it's legal, it's not tampering. It can't be legal tampering. Yeah. It's just a contact period. I hate that. It bothers me.
Contact period. Started at noon today as we sit here at 5:15 recording this. Skylar Thompson's still the only quarterback that we've seen or is under contract for the Steelers. Nobody agreed to. Does that surprise you at all? Justin Fields going to the Jets, Sam Darnold going to the Seahawks. Not necessarily those two moves, but the fact that the Steelers still don't have another quarterback in the carousel.
Well, I mean, I think we talked a lot here over the last few weeks about the Steelers situation. The quarterback, the expectation was they wanted to get a deal done before free agency. The reason they wanted to get a deal done before free agency was that they wanted to be able to go to the free agent wide receivers with the quarterback in mind. So I think 2 things happened here. One, the Steelers made the trade for DK Metcalf before the start of free agency. I think that removed their urgency for saying, look, Justin Fields won't sign. We just have to get somebody inked. Like, they were able to look at Russell Wilson and say, well, look, we don't really think somebody else is beating down the door to sign you. We're going to look around and see what else is happening. I don't get the sense that the Steelers and Justin Fields camp were ever particularly close on a contract. They made an offer last week. I don't think there was like counterplay. I think the Jets were higher significantly, somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million a year more. And I don't even think there was like a counter offer made. I think it was just like, okay, fine, see ya. And the Steelers
after you're saying counter from what the Jets offered. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I was going to say something I do feel good about that I had put out there was that the Steelers did like increase from their original offer to Justin that they had put on the table to go to $30 million over 2 years with 20 guaranteed, but the Jets offered him was $40 million over 2 years with $30 million guaranteed. So
I think 20 itself was too much for the Steelers. Certainly, I don't think they were in a position to feel like they were going to beat that. I don't think the stuff that was put out there about Fields and wanting assurances that he was going to be the starter meant anything. I think it was mostly about money. They were not close on money. Maybe if he had felt a different way about the way things had gone with the Steelers while he was here, he would have been willing to stay for less money. But at the end of the day, money talks. And when you're behind on money, I have a hard time putting this on much other than that. The Steelers did not think he was worth that. I personally thought $20 million was about the top of the market for Justin Fields. So I'm a little surprised he got it, I guess, with only 2 teams seemingly really very interested in his services. But good for him. I don't blame the Steelers for making the decision to not go down that road. But they're also in a position where they may have to make a bad move at some point. Like, if you look at it fundamentally and you say, these are the 6 quarterbacks that signed. None of them signed for a good deal. They were all overpaid. You could say, well, it made sense to pass on all those, but someone still has to play quarterback. Now, I don't think the Steelers are anywhere near a panic point right now, but you got to pay someone eventually. We'll see what they end up doing. I feel pretty good about their ability to land one of Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers if that's the decision they make here.
Yeah. So it seems like it's between those two. And honestly, like I'm expecting Aaron Rodgers. I'll put that out there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think David Mulugeta called Omar's bluff about Russ being plan B. And although there was lots of we're interested in Sam Darnold and we're interested in Aaron Rodgers over the last 24 hours, I think they still wanted Justin Fields. They weren't able to get him. And I think he was right. They did not really believe that Russell Wilson was plan B. They were not ready to go to Russ if push came to shove with Fields. And I think they will prefer Aaron Rodgers to Russell Wilson of those two options. We'll see how things go. I think the big takeaway for me is that the Steelers are focused on 26. They don't see any of these guys as long-term options, and so they're not going to overpay any of them. The idea, as we've talked about a lot, is to quarterback-proof this roster this offseason, and you can't do that if you're overpaying your bridge quarterback.
Yeah, I want to say one thing just because I see in the comments all the time when we've had these discussions like Justin and Russ, a lot of people think that I'm just like super for Justin and super anti-Russ. I'll admit I definitely was probably that latter part, but also acknowledging like Justin isn't somebody like, and I put this take out there on Twitter as well. Like I'm kind of not understanding the fan reception. Like, I don't think that this is some like albatross catastrophe that Justin Fields is leaving the organization. I understand that there's like, because of the alternatives, I think a lot of people might view it as being a bigger deal than it realistically is. But again, we're talking about a bridge quarterback that you hope is the guy for like 2025, and that's it. And, letting him walk out the door, I don't think is, like I said, some catastrophe to the organization, some failure made by them, especially for that number.
If I could have Daniel Jones for 7, I would rather do that than Justin Fields for 20 easily. I'm not saying that.
Has he signed with the Colts yet?
I don't know. I heard there's. I haven't seen anything with him signing. But like, again, and I think look, Russ doesn't have here's the thing. Russ does not have a lot of leverage here. So like there was a report earlier that he was going to be the more expensive of those two. With Justin coming in at 20, I don't know if I see it.
Yeah, how could he? Like, that team would be bidding against themselves.
Yeah, right.
Like, especially if they wait out.
Bidding against him just going home to his lovely wife and enjoying the rest of his life. Like, that's what you're bidding against. But, like, I don't know, man. I think Russ still wants to play. He seemed pretty motivated. I think they will be able to get him for a pretty reasonable amount if they want to. I don't know about Aaron Rodgers. I don't really, I don't know him. So I think it's a little harder to gauge like the walk away point for him. But I think they'll be able to get one of those two guys. I feel good about their chances of getting Rodgers. I actually saw somebody tweet, and I wish I would have grabbed the tweet because it's good. It says the Steelers deal is done. Rodgers is just waiting to announce it on the Pat McAfee show tomorrow, which would be very on brand for him.
It would. All right, so let's talk about just like that, the potential of that happening, what your thought would be, because that is a very different type of offense that we would see all of a sudden in Pittsburgh within 1 year. We talked about last year, when we previewed the Jets game, how Aaron Rodgers likes to run things. You see a lot of like 5 wide receiver sets, likes to get the ball of his hand quick, and he's going to throw the ball a ton. That kind of doesn't mesh with what we've seen the Steelers do recently. So what does this look like, a potential Aaron Rodgers union in Pittsburgh?
Well, I think you go to, and I don't know if Mark did this on purpose, but Mark Cavalli wrote a story, I think it was last night, about Justin Fields and Aaron Rodgers. And in there he said, like, talking about Aaron Rodgers, like someone to go under center for the Steelers in 25. And I was like, yeah, you kind of cooked there, Mark, because the ability to go play under center, the ability to turn his back to a defense and play action, to run like a traditional 3-step drop from under center and get the ball and still get the ball out quickly. Like that's sort of Arthur Smith stuff, and that's Aaron Rodgers stuff. So I think it's a good fit. I think it worked the middle of the field way better than we saw either of the Steelers options do last year. I think to me the big concerns are the mobility factor. We've heard Mike Tomlin go on and on about how much he values quarterback mobility. We saw the Steelers offense get worse in critical areas like short yardage in the red zone when they lost that quarterback mobility, when they went from from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson last year. How do they get that back if they're going to Aaron Rodgers? And then they didn't pass protect all that well last year. Can they keep him upright for 17 games at 41 years old? I think those are valid questions. That's why he's still out there. But I think he looks like the best option at this point.
If it is Aaron Rodgers indeed, and honestly, like I know Russ can still move a little bit, but he's obviously not Justin Fields, that type of athlete. We've talked about the idea of them potentially adding an offensive lineman that we didn't necessarily see coming. Does that all of a sudden become much more of a need for them if it is like Aaron Rodgers is the direction they go? Whether it is, an upgrade on Mason McCormick or some tackle insurance, depending on what happens with Broderick or Fotanu, or should this have been on their radar regardless of who was quarterback?
I think it probably should be on their radar anyway. I think the one thing I will say is if you have Aaron Rodgers compared to like saying if you're, signing Sam Darnold, you better have a backup plan in place. Like you're not going to let a 41-year-old just go with Skylar Thompson behind him. Like I think they would have to invest some money into a backup quarterback at that point. So
and it makes me think that like I had heard this like months ago that Artie had interest in bringing Mariota. And I'm just thinking, like, now is that even, like, do you think that that's plausible or like, how? Okay, all right,
yeah,
because I know, we talked about. I guess it's more of a desire, and if it doesn't, doesn't fall out that way, then it doesn't. And what can you really do? But we talked about, they had the desire to kind of match the starter and the backups skill sets, and that's obviously.
Yeah, I mean, Mariota's not that. I agree. Maybe like Drew Lock, Carson Wentz. That'd be the oldest quarterback room in NFL history. Mason Rudolph, honestly, would be a pretty good fit there.
Oh, man. Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph quarterback room. Man, what a wild time it is.
Mac Jones, I'll throw him out there as well. That'd be a pretty good fit.
Oh, boy. Okay. All right. We got to stop talking about quarterbacks for a second here because I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, but I expected – even with the idea, if we don't get quarterback news early on, I still thought that we could see a lot of other pieces potentially falling into place. Like I thought maybe corner, and not the corner that we're going to talk about here in a second, would be something like super early. I thought wide receiver was one to watch because, like, say they were to spend on a receiver today, that to me would have been very telling about the future of George Pickens. Could have seen something along the defensive line early in free agency, but we really didn't. I mean, so let's go there now. Darius Slay being rumored to be a signing here. Now he's still under contract with Philly technically, so it's like this weird situation where I guess they gotta kind of wait it out until he's officially released. But 34 years old, Darius Slay. We talked about him when that news dropped that he was going to be released. Still a good player. I was interested in him, but I would have said just probably due to age, I had probably like a lot of other guys, maybe like 6 other guys that I would have had higher on my priority list. But what do you make of Darius Slay reuniting with former defensive coordinator Teryl Austin?
Yeah, man, I think I said it when we first talked about it that I saw that he was released by the Eagles or planned to be released by the Eagles, and I looked up his numbers, and I was very surprised that he is 34 years old. I didn't realize he was that old, and when you look at the tape, he doesn't look like a 34-year-old. He played really well as a big part of the defense, a team captain for a Super Bowl winning defense. I think if you are of the idea that Joey Porter Jr. still has more to grow, still has more to give, and can be, but is not yet a number 1 cornerback. Why wouldn't you look at the guy that just did that for Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell and say, hey, come do that one more time, and then maybe we'll figure out who the long-term cornerback 2 for alongside Joey Porter Jr. is in the future. And by the way, also give Corey Trice a year to prove that he can stay healthy and maybe show something to throw his hat in the ring for that job. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think this rules out the idea of them bringing in another corner. They need a slot badly. I still expect them to add another one in some form or fashion, whether that's through free agency or in the draft. And there's still a lot of good corners out there.
Yeah, there are. The one that I had been expecting hasn't signed yet, but Travarius Ward was somebody that I expected this. I mean, potentially Obviously, you're talking about a slot corner, Nate Hobbs, who I had mentioned off the table as he's going to the Packers. But I will say, like, to me, the big winner here, I know you mentioned his name there, right now is Corey Trice. Like, if this is the path that they're going to go forward here, I think because it's not like completely icing him out in terms of his, short term or long term. In terms of what they could view him as. So, assuming that this is like the move for the outside and they bring somebody else in the nickel, I think that Corey Trice would be the big winner there. But yeah, I mean, I like the fit. Obviously, he's played Terrell Austin's defense in the past. I certainly still like him as a player. Think that he certainly has at least one more year of good football left in him. I was looking for more of a, I guess, long-term solution at that spot as opposed to potentially a Band-Aid 1 year thing with Darius Slay.
Yeah, I mean, those were out there, and I don't even think the prices were all that high on some of those guys that did sign, like Paulson Adebo,
DJ Reed, Carlton Davis, they both signed today.
Davis, yeah. So but there's also still a bunch of those guys. Like, you could sign Asante Samuel still, and that would be fine by me. Like, I think that's a good move here. So I don't have a problem with. I really like Slay, and I think you could have made a long-term investment here, but I don't mind the short term either. It's a good upgrade. He's a better player than Donte Jackson, and he is almost as good as all the rest of those guys. Like, it's not like they got a way worse player. They just got an older one that will be doing it for not as long. Mm-hmm. Also, I don't want to give away my whole story, but I'm writing this column, SteelersNow.com. Darius Slay, by being released by the Eagles, does not factor into the compensatory picks formula. Oh boy. Mm-hmm. Hold on. Breaking news.
Oh my God. This is hilarious.
Has been traded to the Cleveland Browns.
Oh, I got so many people to text. I have so many people to text.
Kenny Pickett for DTR and a 5th round pick.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I know the comments are going to love it too. So three NFL teams now for Kenny Pickett already. Off a Super Bowl ring with the Philadelphia Eagles, now going to Cleveland. Do you think that is this just purely their backup? Do you think he's going to have any chance to start there?
I don't have any idea what they're doing. Who's even under contract there besides Deshaun Watson? I mean, I guess compete with Watson? I don't know.
Yeah. Like, if they don't take QB at 2, I'm curious to see what that would mean. Interesting stuff. But
I assume they were going to wait on QB and take Jalen Milroe early in the 2nd round, but I don't know.
Yeah. That's kind of the path that I had thought as well. All right, but you mentioned Darius Slay obviously coming in to take Donte Jackson's place across from Joey Porter Jr. as CB2 there. Donte Jackson going to the Chargers, 2 years, $13 million. The deal that I want to bring up, though, you mentioned the compensatory picks here. Dan Moore Jr. getting the bag in Tennessee, and the possibility that we haven't seen Najee Harris obviously go yet either. But Dan Moore Jr.'s deal with Tennessee, 4 years, $82.5 million, $50 million guaranteed. Massive deal for Dan Moore Jr. Knew he was going to do well on the open market. Did you see this?
I was thinking like 15 a season. 20 is a little surprising to me. I knew it would be good. And when I saw like Alaric Jackson and Ronnie Stanley go off the market before,
right. Yeah.
I knew, like, you want to be the last guy standing in a scarce market. That's how you get paid. He got paid. Good for him. Good for the Steelers. They'll get a 3rd round compensatory pick slot. And that's an important word there, because that 3rd round pick compensatory pick slot will be canceled out if the Steelers sign a countable free agent. And a countable free agent is someone whose contract expired, was not released, was not a restricted free agent, et cetera, and is of a certain salary level. So, like, guys like that are signed like 1 year deals for the minimum don't count. But so it's not a sure thing they're getting a 3rd round pick. But when you look at what the Steelers have done, they'll get a pick for Moore. They'll get a pick for Fields. They'll get a pick for Donte Jackson. They won't lose a pick for Metcalf because it was a trade. They won't lose a pick for Slay because he was cut by the Eagles. It sure seems like that's a focus of what Omar Khan is doing in free agency right now. They're going to get another one for Najee Harris. They might get one for Russell Wilson. Like, they could end up with a whole bunch.
I'm sorry. I saw a tweet. I got to give him a shout out. Noah Hiles with a great tweet here about the Kenny Pickett trade. He said, "So the Browns are acquiring a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Makes sense why Myles Garrett changed his mind now." I love that. Hey, that's something that happened over the weekend as well that we haven't touched on is Myles Garrett's new deal.
Yeah. I mean, right where we kind of expected it to be. I don't think it matters much at all, but yeah.
In terms of, the only thing that it's somebody else signing in front of TJ. I know that you mentioned this before, like any concern with how many guys, like say we do get a Hendrickson trade or whatever, and then he signs Micah Parsons. Like, what if TJ is the last one standing? Is there any concern there about what that number could be as opposed to what
the only thing that concerns me is if Parsons comes in like way over this. That would be concerning. $40 million for me was where those guys were going to be. I think the Steelers should be willing to sign up to match that contract pretty closely, maybe 1 year less because TJ's a year older, but like that amount, I think they should be fine with that. So I like if you could asked me last September, what is Myles Garrett going to sign for this offseason? I would have told you $40 million a year. Like I don't think anyone was a bit surprised by that. So I don't really think it did anything for TJ Watt's contract.
Gotcha. So fully still expecting that to take place and him be under contract for several years going forward. Jaylen Warren also tendered a new contract. Ryan McCollum. So like some internal guys that we had to take care of, RFAs, getting those deals done too. Anything that there to discuss that wasn't expected, or I mean, pretty much status quo?
Yeah, I mean, Jaylen Warren got the second round tender, so like that's 100% that nobody else is going to try to offer sheet him. Costs a little bit more, but they have the money, and that amount is not guaranteed. It's like 5.4 million, something like that. But like, it's not guaranteed, so they will sign Warren to a long-term extension, and that tender won't ever be something he'll play under. I wouldn't expect. So there's not that. Ryan McCollum, I fully expect to be back. Jeremiah Moon is their other exclusive rights free agent. No word on him, so I wonder if this means they are not going to tender him. And Larry Ogunjobi released. I think we all sort of saw that coming. Wasn't sure about the timing, but with that signing bonus coming up at the end of I think it's next weekend, this coming weekend, makes sense to move on from him now while he still has a market and not kind of screw the guy over.
All right, good stuff. And last thing that I wanted to ask you while we're on here, just because obviously free agency negotiating period. What did you call it? Obviously, we don't want to call it tampering.
Contact
what was the word?
Period. Negotiating
contact period.
Too.
Contact period. Okay. Anything else on your radar to watch for in terms of the Steelers, whether it be addition, like we saw Larry Ogunjobi get cut? Anybody else that you would be expecting in that way, or anything?
The other guys they could cut are like Cordero Patterson and Dean Lowry, but they don't make that much, and they don't.
Yeah.
I guess maybe Isaac Seumalo, but I'm not expecting like those can wait. There's not a rush for them. They don't need the money. They got plenty of cap space. So yeah, waiting on quarterback, and we'll see where things go with slot corner and defensive line. A couple of big defensive linemen went. Milton Williams, Grady Jarrett got cut and then signed again very quickly. But there are still a bunch of them out there. Poona Ford went, but I think there's still enough.
Poona Ford, by the way, we talked about him just being like a 1 year by year mercenary. He got 3 years.
I know
with the Rams.
I know.
Yeah. I also wanted to bring up because we just said like, where's the money going to go that they're going to spend here? Like, obviously, large contract handed out to DK Metcalf, but like not going to be a ton of that in year one of the. What's he making? 18 million this year.
We don't even know what his. I mean, they'll tear up that 18 million. That's included in the 150. So his cap hit will be whatever they want it to be. It could be as low as, I haven't done the math, but like, let's say he has a $30 million signing bonus. So I mean that could be. I mean, it could be as low as like 8 million this year.
Wow. Okay. So like, my question becomes,
if you really wanted to like aggressively backload it.
We don't know what the Slay contract's going to be, but like, I don't know. Like, where's this money going to be spent, because I was expecting, like I said, like a high-priced free agent at that position, potentially even corner, to happen today, or wide receiver, but then the DK trade obviously took place.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can still go wide receiver again. I mean, we talked about George Pickens. I don't think the idea of going back to wide receiver is out of the question. I think that's something to keep on your radar as well.
Last thing, anything based off what we've seen take place so far change anything about what you would say about the Steelers draft board?
Well, not having a second round pick definitely changes things for the Steelers.
Well,
I think it makes defensive line in the first round a near 100%er as I look at it right now, and I think it makes running back in the third round or fourth round.
Well, I was thinking, does it increase the likelihood of moving back at 21?
If they don't make another trade to get some more draft capital, yes, I think it definitely increases the chance of trading back, especially if a guy like Grant or Ibuka, that is a more rare talent in this class, is not there at 21. I think trade back then becomes about the third most attractive option.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff. We'll have a lot more coming, obviously, in the coming days as in regards to free agency and a lot more. Until then, tell the people they can find you.
Hey, Saunders _PGH on X, Instagram, when X is working, TikTok and Blue Sky, PGH Steelers Now, the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the words so I can get paid. Like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube platform so you don't miss an episode. If something happens later tonight, maybe I'll jump on, do a little emergency quick podcast, but be back with Morning Rush tomorrow. We got plenty of time to break down the moves.
Here we go. So hit us in the comments with your thoughts, anything that's taken place so far. A question for a future episode, obviously, topic you want us to talk about as we work through the off season here. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing on TikTok, and then you'll find me everywhere. Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.